loud. Okay. So welcome everybody. My name is Alexandra Janelli. I am a hypnotherapist and the founder over at Modrn Sanctuary. It is awesome to have you guys here today to learn about this really cool modality that I'm pretty passionate about. My backstory is I've been doing this since about 2010. And the way that I ended up getting into hypnotherapy is, let's see, back in like 2006 or 7, I ended up going to see a nutritionist who was like, hey, Alexandra, you have this really interesting finger picking thing. Would you be interested in going to see a hypnotherapist we have on staff here? And I was like, that's crazy. But yeah, sure, why not? I'm sort of not into the whole idea of taking high doses of OCD medication, which had been recommended as one of the treatments from a psychiatrist that I had been seeing in psychiatrist. And so I thought, well, this could be a nice opportunity. What do I have to lose besides a little bit of money if it doesn't work? And I ended up seeing this hypnotherapist for 3 sessions and absolutely just felt my life change in like so many different ways. And it wasn't until I moved to Chicago with a couple years later that I ended up leaving my job in environmental consulting to go back to school for hypnotherapy. And if anyone's interested in talking about the schooling and what that looks like, please feel free to email me later or connect with me off the recording because I'd be happy to share my experience. It was wonderful. I started my private practice out in Chicago in Evanston. At the time, the person I was seeing was at Northwestern, so I had the privilege of being able to work with a lot of the students out there to test out some techniques and tools. And then I moved back to New York in 2012, where I mentored with a hypnotherapist here in the city, learned a lot more skills, and they really do call it a practice, like a private practice, because you are constantly practicing. And what I learned in school is a great baseline for the foundation of what is hypnosis, how does it work, and then what you do with people on the baseline of treating things. But it's really from my individual experience with clients, which I've worked with hundreds of clients, anywhere from kids ranging from about the age of 7 all the way up into their 90s, is really how to work with people. And it's everything is so unique. Like there's really no one size fits all to the hypnotherapy practice, which is why I think scripts are great because they give you a baseline. But as we go through this, you'll learn why there are some times that hypnosis works really well for people and other times that it doesn't. So that's a little bit about me. I ended up opening Modrn Sanctuary in 2016 and stepped back a little bit more from hypnotherapy at that time to focus on opening the wellness center because I felt everyone needed a place to heal. And now my joy is really just sharing information and getting it out there to people so that they have these tools to work with. So that in essence is a little just bit of background about me. I'm 38. I live down in Philadelphia, but come back and forth to New York at least 2 to 3 days a week to check on Modrn and see clients. So that's me. So let's move into a little bit about the history of hypnosis. A lot of people, I'm sure their first association with it is probably either you're going to think about Freud, you're going to think about stage hypnosis, you're going to maybe think about dancing like a chicken, doing things that you wouldn't want to. And while all of those things are true, there are a lot more stuff. Thank you, Danny. We love it too. We can't wait till Modrn's open again to have you on the crystal bed. But yeah, so the history of hypnosis actually goes way back all to about 5,000 years ago, where they used to do sleep temples in the ancient times. And while it certainly has progressed since then, they realized that there was this state that you could get into where you would divinely incept a lot of these different messages from the universe. And while that might have been the original beginning state of a lot of this, it's certainly not where it ended up in terms of the therapeutic practice of it. But as we go through time, you end up getting things like oracles. Alexander the Great would have gone to see an oracle who would have had these premonitions, these messages coming through, this divinely connection. he would have connected with an oracle to say, hey, should I be going this way across to conquer this and that? And they would have said yes, but maybe if they had said no, he wouldn't have done it. So there are all these ways in which people began to use this sort of like intervention of this altered state. And then as you continue going forward, the first person who really became most known for hypnosis and really getting into the power of it was Mesmer. And you'll probably hear that word, it's mesmerizing, comes from Antoine Mesmer. Now, Mesmer created animal magnetism, which he realized that his belief was that humans had this magnetic energy or liquid moving through them that you could sort of control and manipulate. And while that was later debunked through the ages, it certainly led to the next sort of uncoverings of different hypnotherapeutic questioning, suggestions. You end up having a lot of doctors recognizing its practice of auto-suggestion. You end up next having Freud coming into the picture, who really would use it, but then sort of poo-pooed it in the end, because one of the theories was that Freud, while he really liked it, wasn't particularly good at it, was a theory that I've heard. But also he felt so strongly that the connection between the therapist and the patient was so important that when someone's in a hypnotic state, he didn't feel that you could really understand what they were going through, which I guess on many levels might be considered true. But my feeling is if you tap into the energy of hypnosis in how someone's relaxing and moving, there is an energy to it, kind of like Reiki as well. So there are a lot of things that you can pick up on, but it's true what that person is experiencing in the hypnotic state at that time when you're working with them, you're not really totally sure exactly how it's manifesting. So, all of this sort of came to be, and it became, a lot of medical practices. It really was studied mostly in the medical field at first, and then it became a little bit more streamlined into the modern era, becoming much more stage shows and where you see it now. And one of my missions in 2010 was to really help bring hypnosis back into the forefront of making it a logical, scientific practice that made it digestible, not just this mythical, I snap my fingers and you're going to be acting like this. So if we look at that and what is hypnosis, the simplest form and simplest answer to that is hypnosis is a state of deep relaxation with an acute focus. And anybody can, yes, be hypnotized. However, if you were an unwilling participant and did not want me to do it, you would not allow yourself to go into that state. Similar to the idea of falling asleep, if you just didn't want to fall asleep, you're not going to do it. And if you can go through falling asleep or waking up in the morning, then you actually can go through the hypnotic state. Because hypnosis is that state between, if this is here, of being awake and this is sleep, it is all of this area in between here. So let's talk about what happens when you go into the hypnotic state. You have, in the awake conscious state, your conscious mind, which is your willpower, your logic, your reasoning, your deductive reasoning. It is the part of you that you use about 90% of the day. Some of us a little less, but it's the part of us that is constantly taking in information, processing it to make it logical, rational, and reasonable. But it only accounts for about 12% of your mind. The other 90% is what we call the subconscious mind. Some people use it interchangeably with the unconscious. It also includes your primitive being, which is, the things you're innately born with, your auto responses like fight or flight. And as you go into the hypnotic state, what happens is you can think of the conscious mind like a tightly woven net, right? Like you drag a net through the water and it's going to, if it has a tight weave, it's going to catch a lot of stuff. And that's what it's like to be in the awake state. You're catching a lot of stuff. But as you begin to fall asleep, that netting begins to open up. And things that once had been caught in that net, slowly begin to slip through into this more creative state. And so as that happens, right, as you begin to fall asleep, the conscious netting's opening up. But what also is beginning to happen is that your focus is beginning to narrow in. And what's really interesting is as it's narrowing in, a lot of people believe, and there's a fallacy that when you're in the hypnotic state, you're not going to remember anything and you're not going to know what's happening at that time. That's actually incorrect. You're hyper aware of what is happening, but you're so acutely focused on that one thing that when you come up, it can sort of be disjarring. It's kind of like when you wake up from a dream, you knew what was happening all through the dream, but when you wake up, you're a little fuzzy on it. And that's what happens when you can get into some of the deeper depths. So as you go down, as you fall asleep, what's also happening is that your brain wavelengths are beginning to shift and change. So you're going to go from, an alpha, beta, theta, delta, all the way down until, which means that your brain wavelengths are changing and shifting. Theta, which is the name of my company, Theta Spring Hypnosis. Theta is that nice, deep, what we call a somnambulistic state. Of like a really nice hypnotic state. That would be like your ideal placement of where you'd want to be when you're doing some of the deeper work. Now, not everybody, when you go into these hypnotic states, need to be in the deepest state. I might want you in more of an alpha or a beta state, which are a little lighter. Because as you go deeper, you're going to begin to have a disconnect between the mind and the body. So you might notice as you fall asleep, your body becomes deeply relaxed, right? Sleep, if you look at it as a pattern, is all about relaxation. You cannot logically make yourself fall asleep. It has to be a process of letting go. And so what happens as you let your body go, the mind then follows suit. And so as you begin to do that, your body disconnects and your mind sort of wanders off into this dream state. Now, that is a great thing if I'm working with you on pain management, body trauma, but maybe it's not a great place if I want to work with you on weight loss, because a lot of times if you are holding on to trauma, which has caused you to hold on to weight, which can happen. I've worked with several clients who have had traumatic experiences from being assaulted or harassed, that they put this weight on as protection. Now, you don't want to live in your body when you're having these emotional experiences. It's very uncomfortable. If you put on a lot of weight after being pregnant and it's very uncomfortable, you don't want to feel that. So you have this natural disconnect from the body where we need to get you back into your body. So to be in those deeper somnambulistic or theta depths are not as beneficial to me as maybe having you in a lighter state. So, depth doesn't guarantee acceptance of the hypnotic suggestion. So we'll get into what is a hypnotic suggestion next, but this is how you get into the hypnotic state. Is we start from this place of awake consciousness, and then we begin to go by relaxation techniques of the body first to get the body respond, and then the mind begins to open up while the focus begins to narrow in. And a lot of people, you'll see what's called a rapid induction, which you'll see in stage shows where someone's all of a sudden just there and they're like, you're asleep. And then you see them just like flop. That's called a rapid induction. What happens is you're building up someone's anxiety in essence, or you're overloading their system with information to the point that they then have so much information. It's like a cup, right? This is your mind. You fill the cup up with water until it begins to overflow. And that's what happens to your mind in a hypnotic state. It's very similar to anxiety. We get overwhelmed, and then all of a sudden we're so focused on the negative and the fear thought that we get too hyper-focused. And that is a hypnotic state. It's just being influenced by a negative thought versus a positive one or a reframing one. And so when we put you into that hypnotic state, your mind is given then the idea that it's like, yes, I can let go. Now I can relax. Great. And it can sometimes that snap or that press down can be jarring. You also add in a physical jarringness to it that the body just naturally will like let go and relax. So it's a very interesting technique that you can use. But if you looked at it on a graph, you're going to see like the hypnotic state, we build you up, and then all of a sudden you drop down, and then you'll come up a bit because your mind's like, wait a minute, I'm going to resist this. This isn't normal. And then it's like, no, I can go along with this. It's safe. And you drop down, you might hear a door slam, and then it's down. So it's like this process of going up and down and up and down and up and down until you finally get there. And so a lot of clients, as they go through the hypnotic process, which it is a process, you know, the logical mind is going to tell you, I need to listen to everything that she's saying. I can't go to that place where I feel like I'm falling asleep. But the truth is, the more that you let yourself just be in the process, know that you don't have to hold on to everything. You go from being an active listener, where again, it's that net tightly woven, taking it all in, to just letting yourself hear what I'm saying. And from the hearing, it will naturally begin to elicit visions, thoughts, emotions. It is that creative state that artists can get into. For a lot of people, it's very visual. For some people, it's more physical, where they're going to experience that emotion in a physical, tangible way. Some people, it's more auditory. Some people, it's more imaginatory, and the difference between visualization and imagination is very slight, but the visualization is like, I can project it, I can see it, I can hold on to the image. Imagination isn't necessarily as clear of an image, but it's like, I could imagine doing it, whether it's for like in third person or actually doing it myself, but I might not be able to hold that image for a long time. And so that, again, it's really figuring out what type of person you're working with and how they learn. And then finally into that is also understanding that when you're working with someone who's introverted versus extroverted, they do get hypnotized a little bit differently as well. So interestingly enough, introverts, when you're working with an introvert really just means the way that you take in information is different from someone who is an extrovert and how they take in information. An introvert, from the moment that they were born until later in life, assuming their parents stay pretty similar throughout this, an introvert had a discrepancy in messaging units coming through, meaning, let's first assume they get spanked for doing something bad, and then the parent then says, but you know I love you, right? There's the pain, and then the you know I love you, which is a contradictory. So they're always looking as what you mean, what you say, what's the metaphor, what's the underlying thing that's happening here. Where an extrovert might have had a hug, and it's like, you know I love you. So the messaging unit is congruent. It makes sense. So what happens is introverts, as they begin to understand the hypnotic suggestions, they'll learn better through a metaphor. And an extrovert will learn better through direct suggestion. So an example of that would be, you will feel light as a feather, which would be an introvert suggestion. And then on the other side, it would be, you will feel light. I want you to float. And it's how you pick up on how you hypnotize someone is it's all about listening, active listening to how they're speaking to you in a session. Introverts will be a little more metaphorical in the way they're talking to you. It feels like the weight of the world is on my shoulders. Where an extrovert will be very long-winded. They can be very emotional at times, very dramatic, and not dramatic in a bad way, but they're just going to wear their heart on their sleeve. Because they feel it. They feel the emotions very clearly. There's like a real clear connection between emotion and thought emotion. And then with the extrovert, it's sort of like, what am I feeling? I'm not sure what I'm feeling right now. There's a disconnect between the mind and the body, which will take them a bit to get to where they're going. So the way that you treat them in the hypnotherapeutic process is really getting to know them also in terms of what suggestion works. And then interestingly enough, you can have someone who falls 50-50 in the introvert extrovert category, because you can be 80-20, 100-0, you can fall. And you can even have people who go from being an extrovert who have a trauma experience and end up to be an introvert by default because of an experience that they've had. So it's working with them to really understand their innate way of being, and then what is this coping mechanism being too. So all of these layers come out when you're working with a hypnotherapist. But when you get someone who falls in the 50-50 realm, they are what we call a somnambulist. They're highly suggestible. They're very easy to get into the hypnotic state. And somnambulism, if you look at the Greek term of it, means sleepwalking. And so a lot of times you can find that they are in this very dreamy state a lot. It's easy to work with them because they can go to that place very quickly. And sometimes you just need to teach them how to get out of the hypnotic state too. So that's a little bit about the hypnotic state and what it is, how it works. And I figured this might be a great time to stop to see if anybody has any questions so far, or if I'm going too fast. So if you have a question, you can just go ahead and type it in the chat box. If not, I can unmute you all for a second. If anyone has any questions, go ahead and let me know. Super. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and mute you guys again. And we will jump into the theory of the mind. So, okay, so now we know what hypnosis is and how it works, but why do we use it, right? So if you look at as hypnotherapists, what we are behaviorists, and we believe that everything is learned through association, right? So on a conscious level, we might say, I know why I'm doing this and what I'm doing, but I don't know how to change it. And so conventional therapy is going to go in, talk therapy, and it's going to help you take all of what's going on in your subconscious, to bring it up into the conscious state, to be aware of it. But that doesn't necessarily shift the behavior. And so where do these behaviors come from, right? Let me just check this one question. You said the extrovert is mind-body disconnect, but I think you meant to say, yes, the introvert. Thank you, Danny. You are correct. The introvert is the disconnect, correct. So everything is learned through association, right? From the moment that you're born, you are learning by doing, right? So as you go, everything begins to get stored as a pain or a pleasure, right? So these are where your behaviors come from. You're only born with the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises. And then as you go, if you get bit by a dog and develop a fear of dogs, you've created the association that dogs are painful. Therefore, when you see a dog, your subconscious mind, which makes up about that 90%, is going to react. It's going to have a reaction. And therefore, you might be able to say from a logical point of view, wait, it's a small dog, it's on a leash, it's behind a fence, but you're going to have that behavior first and foremost. And every experience we have can begin to confound this. We can create coping mechanisms that can aid that or add to it, intensify it. But this is what happens, is that we create these associations in the subconscious mind of a way of being where we've learned it from our parents. We learn through doing, and it then gets programmed into the subconscious mind. And the question becomes, everything is fine until it doesn't work for you in your life, right? So you have a fear of dogs, you've created this association, and on a logical level, you get it. You understand dogs are fine. You've seen people have dogs that are fine, but you just can't get over it. And now the person that you're marrying, dating, etc., has a dog, and you want to be able to live with them, but you're afraid. And then it becomes a problem, right? It's never a problem until it's a problem. And so at this point, you can go to talk therapy, and for a lot of people, sometimes talking about it and being aware of it can help you create a shift. But for other people, it's just so innately ingrained that they can't get that behavioral shift. And this is where a hypnotherapist can come in. Now, it is not a foolproof process, but the process looks like this, is that again, as you go through that hypnosis process, we can go into the subconscious mind to offer to your subconscious an alternate way of being. So from the pre-talk in our session together, I would start to understand, why is this important to you? What is it you'd like to feel? You might say, I just like to feel comfortable. it's important that I pick up on what you're saying, the word comfortable, because I could go and say, you're going to love dogs. But if that's not your goal and that's not terminology you would normally use, you're going to reject that suggestion. It's not going to sound like something you'd say. It's not going to get your buy-in. And so you're going to therefore take it into the critical area, to the mind, and then just be like, no, it doesn't work, and kick it out and forget it. And so as you go into the hypnosis portion, I take all of your information and I go in to be a negotiator for you. And the idea is that your subconscious mind wants to say the same because it's safe, right? Like, it's safe. We like what we know. It is the pleasure principle of, if I know it, I know how to deal with it and I know what to do with it. If I don't know, I'm going to avoid it. I don't want to do it. It's nerve-wracking. So once we go into the hypnotic state, I'm going to go in to negotiate to say, here's where you're at, right? This is where you are, but wouldn't this be nicer? Wouldn't this be better? Wouldn't it be more comfortable for you and more enjoyable and all? And there's many ways that you can frame it, suggest it, but you're going to give it to the mind in visuals. Maybe you're going to play out a scenario or a scene. Sometimes it's as simple as, you will feel comfortable. You will like this. Again, that's a direct suggestion. Maybe it's a metaphor. It's all about how you provide it to the mind and in what state and how you get to do it. Now, when you're working with things like past traumas, you can have, the mind can reframe things. Like, I had a girl who was afraid of flying. She never had been in a plane accident. She ended up having a drop of blood sugar on the plane because she hadn't eaten that morning. The plane was really hot, and she associated it with flying from that point forward. In fact, she went out, she would only take buses, and her bus was held up at gunpoint, and she still wouldn't get on a plane. She'd rather get on a bus. And her and I worked together. And so what we did was we would go back. First, we talk about the idea of fear and how she can conquer it. And then in additional sessions, we actually go through some systematic desensitization of walking her through each of the scenarios of getting on the plane, sitting on the plane, listening to the dings and the sounds and triggering her. Because the idea is, if in the awake state, if I've had clients who, when they're sitting in my office and they're talking about a fear of flying, there's no planes around, there's no plan to get on a plane, but just talking about it, they get so uptight and they get so, you can just see the fear coming up. They're reliving that trauma right there. That if they can think about it and it's not even happening, we can have them think about it with it not happening too. So we put them into the hypnotic state and we set what's called the control of the deeply relaxed state. And then we begin to trigger the client. We actually elicit the anxiety response of fear of flying, and we bring it up. And then we give them the control in that state to show them how to bring it down by having them walk through the steps, like in whatever it is that they want to feel, showing them that they can get there. And you also give the suggestion, the harder you try to bring it up, the harder it becomes, because they can't. They're so deeply relaxed that they physically and mentally cannot bring it up. And you'll find that you might not eradicate the fear 100%. You might take it from like an 8, 9, 10 to a 2, 3, 4. But at the 2, 3, 4, the client still feels in control. At an 8, 9, 10, they don't feel like they can control it. And so that's what we work on, is getting it lower and lower and lower through systematic desensitization, visualization, sounds. I worked with a girl who had a fear of needles, and the smell of rubbing alcohol would trigger her. So again, we would utilize just the smell, have her, put her in the relaxed state, bring it up, hit her with some rubbing alcohol. It's not a pleasant smell, and then relax her down. I ended up going with her to the doctor's appointment. She hadn't gotten blood tested in 10 years and had it done. All was great. So, it's sometimes not about eradicating a fear, but just being able to control it, and how you can do that with the power of the mind by negotiating with the mind into what it wants and what would feel better at this point. Because again, if you look at this from the pain pleasure principle, you only know what you know up until this point. going into the future is unknown, right? Like how many times have we been like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen, but I've been through a similar situation. Therefore, I'm going to take what I've known in the past, place it into the future, so that at least I have some context of what might happen to be prepared. And as anxiety goes up, your confidence goes down. And as fear goes up, fun goes down. So the idea is, how can you begin to find your confidence through this idea of whatever happens, I can figure it out. Do you trust yourself enough? And so there's a lot of like work that I work with clients on, not just in the hypnotic state, but in the states beforehand, which is why I ended up going back to school for coaching about, I guess it was 5 years ago now, to really give them those added tools. A lot of people will ask how many sessions someone typically works with me. And I typically work with clients anywhere from 1 session to about 6 or so. My theory is that if what you came to work on isn't getting shifted within a few sessions on some level, one, we're either not tapping into the root association of what's really going on, or it's just not the right modality. But I can tell you that I've had clients come to me for things like sleep. And while sleep might be the presenting problem, it's usually not what you end up working on. And why is that? So I'm not sleeping. Okay, well, we have to get into the root association, because remember, everything goes back to the subconscious mind of what is it that's causing you not to sleep? Okay, well, I'm having a hard time falling asleep because my thoughts are so active. Okay, well, what are you thinking about before you fall asleep that's causing you to have all this active thought? Well, I'm thinking about work. Well, what about work, right? You just keep digging down. Well, I'm thinking about the fact that my boss, told me that I might lose my job. Okay, well, what about that freaks you out, right? It freaks me out that like, I'm going to have all these bills to pay. This is going to happen. This is going to happen. Okay, well, that makes sense that would be a fear. And if that did happen, well, so you get into the deep nitty gritty. And if you can find the fear point, you can begin to work on the fear point. And sometimes the suggestion can be as simple as, if you didn't have this fear and you could just put it aside, what would you do differently today? And a lot of people, it's like you're getting them to think just to the side. Like, it's like if you think about a circle, there's 360 degrees on the circle. They get so stuck on this one like thought process that just stepping to the side can open up all this creative thinking to be like, wow, if I didn't have fear, I would do this. And you're going to see their eyes. What's interesting about the eye movements is when someone's beginning to tap into an emotion. Have you ever watched someone who's really deeply sad or depressed? They look down. They're digging down into an emotion that they've had, that they've experienced, to draw upon it. And then when they begin to look up, I know in criminal stuff, they'll say, if you look up and to the left, you're lying. But you're starting to create. It's like you'll see people and they're like, wow, that's a great question. And they start to look up because they're starting to create something that might not have been plausible or thinking there before. Hey, Blake, great question. Would hypnotherapy work with remote sessions? I was talking to Bill about this earlier. I typically find that I like to work with clients first in person, because so much of what happens as you go through the hypnotic state can be body language. But yes, a lot of people do offer phone sessions as long as I can watch the body. This is a great segue into what does happen to your body as you go through the hypnotic state. So if you came into my office, I have a reclining zero gravity chair. You can certainly do it sitting up on a couch and laying in bed. I would have you just start by what we call an eye fascination. There's a lot of ways to get into the hypnotic state, but I like to personally use what's called an eye fascination. And an eye fascination is having you stare directly ahead of you to one point on the wall, or your quintessential hypnotherapist might use a stop clock. And that stopwatch, they would have you just watch it going back and forth, and it again overstimulates your senses. Again, so the mind, like a cup, you're filling the cup up so that it gets overstimulated and then just wants to get out and turn off. So when you give it the ability to quiet down, shut down, it can go great and let go. And then you would be much more open to the suggestion. So as you're staring ahead, you would then, offer this, you're going to start to see the person's eyes beginning to get really tired. They'll start to flutter, and you can give them the suggestion, the harder you try to keep them open, the harder it becomes. And that word try, right? If we look at it from a subconscious language, sets up the preposition already that you're not going to be able to do it. And the client typically then has a really hard time doing it, or you're going to find that they're rebellious clients and they will then do it extra hard and keep them open. And that again gives you more information on the client of what you're working with at that point, that they still want to be in control. So you're going to work with them in a different way. But let's assume for a second that they do take the suggestion. The harder you try to keep your eyes open, the harder it becomes. And you feel their eyes begin to flutter, and you give them permission as you count from 5 to 0, that when you get to 0, the eyes close. Now, again, you're creating associations as you go through the patterning. That 0 is going to represent relaxation. So as they close the eyes, they're going to go from, you've built up the mind, they're going to drop. And you're going 0 is relaxed. Great. Good. And you keep giving them positive affirmations. Great. Now that you've done that, we're going to go even deeper. And then you're going to walk through what we call a progressive relaxation. You've probably done it if you're into yoga or meditation, where if you're sitting up, you're going to start from the top of the head down the body, relaxing every muscle. If you're working with someone who's a little more introverted, you might use metaphors like a soothing liquid flowing down the body. If you're working with someone who's a little bit more extroverted, you might say, relax your shoulders, relax your neck. So as you go, if someone's laying down, you can start from the toes moving up. As you do that, you want to challenge people to see how heavy can you make their body, right? People like a challenge. If you imagine, right, that your arms are so heavy that you could hardly lift them, what would that be like for you? Get them to think, because what the mind wants to do naturally is think. Like, how often do we lay in bed and your mind's like, give them something to think about. What would it be like if your arms were too heavy to even lift? And they're going to be like, oh, I wonder. Right? We want to wonder as we wander through the hypnotic session. Now, as you're beginning to relax the body, what you're going to start to see is any tension and tightness is going to begin to relax and let go. There is a reason they call it a drunk person dead weight, right? If they pass out, they are dead weight. Their body has no tension in it, nothing. The same thing can happen in the hypnotic state. You are letting the body go. You want to get it to be dead weight. Great. Other things that you might notice as you go through the hypnotic state, things that I can't notice as a hypnotherapist, but the client will, tingling in the tips of the fingers, tingling in the tips of the toes. And those can sometimes even be moved through the body as you go up or down. These are good signs to me that they are going into these hypnotic states. Sometimes, depending on the angle, it can be blood moving, but for the most part, if that's not it, it is a great sign that you're beginning to move into these deeper states. And then what happens, the breathing becomes very shallow. So normally you can watch the breath coming in and out, but as you go into these hypnotic states, you need and require way less oxygen, and the breathing becomes very shallow. So you'll begin to see as if like almost they're not breathing. You do not point this out to your anxious clients in the hypnotic state. And I always get sometimes annoyed when I listen to yoga or meditation tapes that they're like, take a nice deep breath, because when you're in the hypnotic state, you cannot. And it's going to typically make someone who's trying to take a deep breath get a little anxious because they're like, oh my God, I can't. Because you need less oxygen, you're deeply relaxed, your body doesn't need as much oxygen at that point. And so when you're working with anxious clients, you just try not to even maybe think about the breath. You can talk about light breathing patterns of feeling the air move up and then down. Now, the other crazy thing that you're going to notice, most people don't notice it, but I look for as a hypnotherapist, when people close their eyes, once they're going to move into the hypnotic state, you're going to notice a light flutter of the eyes moving up and down when you're in that light, like alpha to beta hypnotic state. So I'm going to see if I can show you what it looks like. It's like a light flutter of the eyes. I don't know if you can see that clearly, but it's a light flutter. It's great. It's a light state. If you're ever feeling anxious, you can test yourself. Just close your eyes, relax, see if they begin to flutter. If they do, you're overloaded. Give yourself a moment. And this is one of the techniques we talk about. Give yourself a moment to just slowly like count down. I like to focus. If I am going to focus on a breath, I like to focus on the exhale, just short breaths out, and how each breath is like getting your body to go down, right? Because everything is about going down. It's like we want to get out of the head, into the body, and get grounded. So the eyes will move like this at first, and then they're going to start to move back and forth like an REM. So a hypnotherapist, sometimes I'll use the suggestion when they're in that hypnotic state to think about a pendulum moving side to side, and you're starting to naturally elicit the eyes to do that movement. And then the third state that happens when you go into the somnambulistic state is the eyes roll up and inward. And there is a hypnosis test that you can do. I believe it's on my website, of where you have a client, you can test them for how suggestible they are, of having them look directly ahead and then look up without moving your chin. It's like look up, and then as you walk, you have them close their eyelids while still looking up. Some people can't do it. That just means they're not as naturally suggestible. If the client can keep their eyes looking up while they close, so it'd be like this, look up and then close, you'll see their eyes are going to remain either up or they're going to start to roll inward. If they roll inward, you're moving them towards what's called the somnambulistic depth, that theta state. Your pineal gland is like right here, your mind's third eye, but you're naturally pushing them into a deeper depth. Now, what happens when I get my clients into that first relaxed body and I naturally start to push the eyes up, some people can get a little bit of a headache, but you almost feel like you're leaving your body. It is a strange sensation and it doesn't feel logical. Again, your conscious mind is still intact. So it's going to be like, wait, this doesn't feel right. But the moment you're like, I trust her, just go with it. Okay. You begin to the suggestion I like to give is imagine what it would be like if you could open your mind, or if there were a small opening right here in the center of the forehead that you could begin to lift and rise up out of your head, leaving your body to sleep. And you'll notice that dark twilight expanse behind your eyelids and forehead. And this is where you start to really connect into the subconscious state. And this is where we start to work. But what you'll notice in a client is, again, their eyes roll. I have had one or two clients that, creepy enough, their eyes are open, but all you see is the white of their eyes. It's very rare, but it's totally creepy to work with. So I'm always like, oh my God, it's happening. But they are in that deep state. And then you can also tell when they come out that their eyelids when they open, their eyes roll back down. And you can see that happen as well. But if you're in that nice, deep hypnotic state, and I say to you, I am going to stab you, which I would never say, but let's assume that I did. You would immediately most likely wake up, meaning you would open your eyes. You were never under my control. You would maybe start to flinch or twitch. I know when I touch on something that does not resonate with a client. Let's see. I was personally working with my hypnotherapist when I first went through my finger picking. And I remember he was touching on something that obviously was very uncomfortable to me. And I started tapping my hand on the chair. I had no idea I was doing it until he pointed it out, because my focus was not on my hands. It was here in my head. And I started tapping. And it was my body's way of saying, I'm not comfortable. I feel out of control. And we'll talk about the body syndromes that happen. And so he pointed it out to me and I stopped. And then I said, I didn't want to talk about it, and we moved on. But I've seen clients start to go like this with their mouth, and there's something that they want to say. And I'll stop the session and just say, there's obviously something that is coming up. Can you just let me know? And, you can talk in the hypnotic state. They'll walk you through it. And you say, great, we just reframe it and move on. And it's as simple as that. Or you'll see people do what's just the opposite. If you hit them with a suggestion that really resonates with them, you'll see their breath go. It's like a sigh of relief. And I see this a lot with clients who are going through past traumas. When we reframe them or give them permission, permission's a big word in the hypnotic state, permission to move forward from it, that this doesn't have to define what their future looks like. It's like this like weight leaves their body. I've also seen with clients, their skin smooths out. When you carry a lot of stress in your body, it does wreck your body. And this is where we get into things called body syndromes. And body syndromes are, we have our natural fight and flight response of, you know, if a lion's coming at you, you want to be able to run. But we perceive everything in that way now, and we can't run. We fight, flight, or freeze. But when we can't get it out, that energy, we put it into the body, and we get things like finger picking, nail biting, jaw clenching, teeth grinding, random headaches. So I personally, I'm not a doctor, but I believe IBS can be a huge symptom of this. You can get foot tapping. What are the other ones? Trichotillomania, hair pulling, eyelash pulling, lash pulling, pinching, lots of different stuff, picking. And these body syndromes, when they come in the different areas, they're just signs for me of where to work too. So anything, the body syndromes start with from the top of the head down to the sternum. We call it the crying syndrome, teeth grinding, jaw clenching. It's like an inability to express yourself or make decisions. I've worked with teeth grinding and jaw clenching a lot and had great success with that also. It's very cool. It's a stress response. Hands, if it's from the arms down, it's like feeling like that thing that you want is out of your reach, it's out of your control. And then shoulders is like too much responsibility. And, you know, we all sit at a desk, so it's learning how to discern between like, yes, this is just a posture thing, or no, this is a responsibility syndrome. And then you get into the stomach area, which can be guilt and sexual frustration. And that does incorporate into the lower back. And then legs is trying to get away from someone, or something, or thought. And you'll see this with clients when I start talking about things that are uncomfortable. You'll see their legs start to kick and tap. And, you know, again, if I think about needles, my legs tingle. It's just your mind's way of being like, get away, get away. So these are all places that we look with clients to begin to figure out, like, how do we work with their body too, if they're having body syndromes as well in the hypnotic state. So, you know, I know that I'm throwing a lot. Does anybody have any questions? I'm going to just quickly unmute you guys if you have any questions about anything so far.
No.
Okay.
I don't have one, no.
Okay, good. Okay, good. It's a lot of info, but all right, I'm going to mute you guys again. Okay, so now I figured what we could do is really just get into really doing a little bit of hypnosis if you'd like to. Again, as I tell everybody, you're never under my control. I'd love to teach you guys some self-hypnosis techniques. So if you are sitting in a chair or laying in a bed, that's totally fine. However you want to do it, I'm going to do the progressive relaxation starting from the top of the head to the toes. So you might find it would be more beneficial to be sitting a little bit up, even if you are laying down, having your head above your heart. And what we'll do is we'll have you start staring directly ahead of you, whether that's at the computer screen or at the ceiling, wherever that is. And what I'd like you to do is just find one place outside of yourself that you can focus on. And the idea here is that the more that we can focus on something outside of yourself is to say that right now it's okay to focus on something outside of ourselves. And if we can connect to something outside of ourselves, we might even begin to notice. This is just a technique you can use too, is to look, to observe, to be the observer right now. And to find that one place that you can observe and ask yourself, what do I see? What are the colors, patterns, shapes, markings, distinguishing features? And if I allow my eyes to begin to soften and the muscles around my eyes to begin to relax, what would that feel like? And if I notice that my eyes, like a camera lens, could become very focused or unfocused, Could I allow myself to allow them to be very unfocused and to soften and to feel the weight of my eyelids and the blinking sensation? And if you allowed that blinking sensation to get greater and greater, and you allowed the eyelids to feel heavier and heavier, as if they were drawing down toward the lower lids, and we gave ourselves permission to count from 5 to 0, knowing that counting down numbers are finite, the mind likes numbers, and that each number we go down brings us a little more relaxation into the body, into the mind, into the eyes, so that when we get to 0, the eyes can close, if not before. And we rhythmically count out the numbers 5, down to 4, to 3, and 2, as if each number could disappear from the mind at 1, letting it go. And at 0, just letting the eyes close and taking note of what that feels like in the eyes. That feeling of heaviness, the connectivity of the upper and the lower lids, and maybe even a nice fluttering of the eyes underneath the eyelids. Becoming aware of the sensation of the chair or the bed or the couch, wherever you are, sitting or laying. Recognizing that your body right now is supported and being curious and wondering what would it be like to allow that chair or couch to support you completely. To know that you are supported in this moment. And as you feel your body beginning to move down, thinking about the idea of gravity, the idea of being grounded right here, right now, that in this moment we give ourselves permission to know that there's nowhere you need to go. There's nowhere you need to be. And there's nobody wanting or needing anything from you. And what a wonderful thing to know that you have permission to just be. And even though your mind might wander and drift, we can allow it to. Allow it to wander into that twilighty darkness behind the eyelids. Beginning to see that infinite expanse of possibility presented before you. And beginning to think about what it would be like with your curious mind, your imaginative mind, your visionary mind. Of what it would be like if a soothing liquid could melt down the top of your head and move down your neck, softening each muscle as it goes. And you'll first feel it move down the back of the neck into the shoulders, beginning to note the weight of your head as it surrenders into what's underneath you and supporting it. Maybe it begins to list to the side, getting heavier and heavier. All the weight of your thoughts, of your knowledge, and your mind, and your head, as you begin to relax your shoulders. And letting that soothing liquid slowly slide over the shoulders into the arms. Becoming curious of how would it feel as the liquid moves down past the biceps to the elbows, into the wrists, into the hands. What if it could drip off the tips of the fingers, bringing with it any stress? And as the hands begin to move down, a light tingle, permission to let go into your state of truth, into your higher being, yourself, into a state of deep groundedness. Again, allowing yourself to feel gravity, that energy that keeps us grounded. And as we feel the arms, wondering what would it feel like or be like if my arms were too heavy to even lift right now, and why would I want to if I gave myself permission to just be? And to think about the soothing liquid melting down over the chest, maybe even being poured over the stomach. How it would melt and soothe and melt down over the stomach and then to around the hips and pool under the back. And to move down under the legs. As if you could begin to float in this soothing liquid, as if it were a warm bath or a pool on a perfect day. And as you think about the body just moving down, we begin to draw our awareness and our thoughts to the tips of your toes and the soles of your feet, and thinking about a red, glowing, ruby red light. The red root chakra color helping you feel grounded and warm, moving energy to the feet, down through the body. And then slowly tracing a line up the front of the legs, connecting to the belly button, moving up the center line of the body, up the chin, over the nose to right in the center of the forehead, where we can create and be curious and wonder what it would be like if there were a portal there, or a door, or just this idea of being able to get out of your head for a moment, to leave your body to rest, to sleep, to open the mind and begin to lift and rise and lift and float into that expanse. Feeling free for a moment, allowing yourself to know how in control you are, how powerful you are, to imagine here in this place connecting with your higher self, your all-knowing self. And in this openness, the quietness, the stillness that we can feel and hear and notice, being open to this idea that we can control the fear in the mind by simply gathering it up into a ball and placing it just to the side. That we have the ability to just place it to the side. And then bring into the forefront of us gratitude, appreciation, joy, the image of someone that we love, a picture, a color, a smell. To bring in this sensation of peace. And even this idea that we are in this together. We are all connected. And what an interesting and beautiful energy to tap into. And if we take that energy and we begin to now channel it back down as if it were a light, and you can pick the color, or maybe it has a color all on its own, or maybe you don't see any color, but you could just imagine this energy flowing through you, down through the mind, down the neck, and into the hands. As if you could create this ball of energy right in the palms of your hands, that you can hold, that you can control, that you can have. In fact, you can even feel a light, warm feeling beginning to happen. Feeling that energy pooling in the hands. That you now control how you feel. You have the ruby red glow of the groundedness in the body. Permission to let go of anything that no longer serves you right now. As if it were a chapter in your life that could now be put away on the shelf. To come back to center, to groundedness, to your hands. And then as we begin to come back up and out of this state, we start with the number 0. So we can associate 0 to this calmness, this peace. Coming up to 1 and 2 to 3. At 4 with the eyes still closed, just taking a moment to link together a word. One word that you're feeling right now. Associating it with your body. If the word was gratitude, or mine was appreciation. Body, this is appreciation. Shoulders, this is appreciation. Arms, this is appreciation. Whatever it is, you're linking it, tying it to the body. And then when you come up and out of this state, Allowing the eyes to open, finding that spot that you were looking at again. Locking your eyes in on it. Noticing it. And then allowing your eyes again to close. And this time, as the eyes close, going twice as deep. And as we count from 5 down to 4, to 3, like steps down a staircase at 2, to 1, back to 0, because going down this time is even easier now that the mind knows what to expect. And when we're in this state, looking up there behind the forehead to that infinite expanse. And I'd like you to write, imagine writing your word there on the inside of your forehead, as if it were a message for you to always have in the forefront of your mind. And then imagine it like a soothing liquid melting down the body. The same way we did at the beginning, melting down the body to the tips of your toes. Surrounding your whole body in that energy. And from here, again, we start from 0, coming up to 1, to 2, and 3, beginning to awaken the body to the sounds in the room around you. At 4, allowing yourself to begin to take a deeper breath. And at 5, go ahead and open your eyes, bringing your attention back into the room. And sometimes I like to have people just go ahead and stretch out their arms to get the body moving. And then just take a moment to notice how you're feeling. So how are you guys feeling? Sorry about the screaming baby in the background. Hopefully she's okay. My husband's with her. So what did you guys experience going through that? That's just a very short and very light treatment of hypnosis. Did anyone have any questions about what they experienced? It's very similar to meditation in a lot of ways, in that we are guiding you to that place of openness. So what we did was very similar to meditation. What would be different in a session of hypnosis together would be, as you're in that state, the hypnotic state, I would then go into negotiate subconsciously with your mind to the things that you would like to change on a behavioral level. Danny, you asked me a question. When you work with clients who have experienced sexual abuse, say rape, do they typically have a harder time surrendering to the experience because they don't want to let go of being in control? Great question. I have found, yes, that is true. I will say that one of the key elements to hypnosis is trust and rapport with your client. And if you are feeling that there is resistance, it's a very normal thing. It's, I would definitely say in every session, there's always going to be a level of resistance. If I just was not getting along with the person, or they did not like me, or I didn't feel like I could help them, I would immediately bring that up with them and create a plan around that. But yes, they really have to trust you to go do this work. And sometimes it's as simple as really starting simply with just showing them what the hypnotic state is lightly before you do any work. But I would say, it also depends where they're at in the process of dealing with a situation like that. With something like that, I would want to know if they had been in therapy to work on it with a psychiatrist or psychologist or psychiatrist to see where they're at, because I wouldn't want to re-traumatize them. And, there's a lot of different ways to work on that if they are working with a therapist too. Sometimes it's going back through to reframe it, but my more powerful way that I prefer to work with people is to bring them forward, their past self, because I believe we're kind of like Russian dolls, that we exist at every age. And where we have trauma, I don't know if anyone was listening to Gloriana's field talk, but we have an energy to us, and we get these stuck energies at different ages, similar to trauma. So it's like, I would want to work with that person who had been maybe traumatized. Let's say it was 2 years ago. I would maybe want to imagine bringing that person forward 2 years to show them that like life goes on, things are safer, better, versus having to go relive it all again. But you can do it that way too. I would want to work under the in collaboration, because I'm not a licensed psychiatrist or psychologist. I would want to work with someone directly who is licensed in that. But I do feel you can do just as powerful, if not more powerful, work bringing that person forward. Because the theory is also, if you're working with people who have like addiction, I don't work with a lot of addiction other than smoking, and I've sort of passed on that myself too recently, but you work with them at the age when it started, because there was obviously something that created that association at that age, that's where you want to work to let it go. And then there might be other compounding stuff to desensitize to, but you start at that age. Does that answer your question? Let's see. I'm just reading through these quick comments. Hey, Blake. Yeah. So, you know, hypnosis is really amazing, but I do find like it's all about finding the person that you feel comfortable with. There have been many times that I've worked with a client for one session and they get a lot out of it. My goal with any client is always to provide you guys with the tools to move through in your life. And I do find that, like, you know, I've worked with things like nail biting. And it's funny because I wish everyone's always like, how many sessions? And there's times when I've been like, oh, I usually can do it in like 1 or 2. And then sometimes it takes more. It's, you know, it's so hard to tell. I can tell you the things that I've had no luck with whatsoever are hair pulling. Had no luck with that. I can't explain why. And then sometimes weight loss, hypnotherapy, weight release is a very tricky programming. It works really well, but it's usually people don't get the results they want to see as quickly as they can. But that's always a tricky one too. And if you tell me you want to stop eating vegetables, or that you want me to help you because your wife or husband or this or that want you to do it, it won't work either. You have to genuinely want to do it. Yeah. Anyway, does anyone have any other questions or things that I did not tap into? I know that we totally run over here. I could talk for hours about this, but I'm happy to answer them if anyone has any other questions. Yes. Oh, let me unmute you. Hold on, Danny. Did I unmute you?
My question is just what kind of training did this require? Does it require also being like a psychologist or psychiatrist, or is it a completely separate thing and do you do it elsewhere?
Sure. Great question. I am not a licensed psychiatrist or psychologist. It is there's 2 programs you could do. I went to the school HMI, the Hypnosis Motivational Institute, where you can take the classes, the residency out there in, it's right outside of LA. They also offer the only accredited program for hypnotherapy. That's a distance learning program, which was what I did. And it's about, I did the program in about 9 months. I did it really quickly. And then I mentored for another 2 years under a person here in Manhattan for another 2 years on top of that. And then, but the program itself, what I really liked about it, so important thing to think about if you are going to start working with a hypnotherapist, whether it's myself or someone else, is to ask what type of training they do have, because there are programs where you can learn to hypnotize someone. It's not hard to learn some of the techniques to hypnotize someone. You can take that in like a 2-hour class. The tricky part of hypnosis is really, what do you do with someone once they're in the hypnotic state? right? So, what happens if they start to have an ab reaction or start to panic in the hypnotic state? How do you treat smoking? How do you do past life regression? How do you work with an introvert versus an extrovert, etc.? So that's where the training really takes it to the next level. Certain states will require you to be a licensed professional. This is a certification. I'm part of a union. I know the union that I'm in has worked hard to keep it out of the mental health field as a licensing. My feeling also is know your limits and know your boundaries as a hypnotherapist. Luckily in New York, most of the people I work with are already in therapy or have been to therapy. But it's important to know that if you are going to work with someone, like depression, for example, I won't work with people who are highly depressed because unless they're seeing a psychiatrist or psychologist, reason being is in a depressed mind, it's not that they mean to, but be a lot of pessimism where you can offer them a suggestion and it can actually be manipulated to be very negative, even though it's not meant to be. Like you could say a suggestion like this, like terrible, funny story, but not a great story, but my father at my brother's wedding got up and like looked around the room and he's like, Christian, who's my brother, he's like, this is like as good as it gets. And like everyone was appalled that he said this, but what he meant was like, this is as good as it gets, like having everyone you love in one room. But like it got manipulated into the idea of like, this is it, man, like it's all downhill from here. And so when you're working with someone who can be very depressed, there is a level of pessimism that can really turn things. And it can be very complicated to make sure that you get the suggestion really just into their mind properly. But some states you do have to be licensed, but again, you can work under a referral. And typically it's not covered by insurance either. Good question. And then one resource for all of you guys, and I'm just going to type it into the chat box right now, is I have a whole library of hypnosis recordings that I am providing for free. I started putting them together about 10 years ago. Some of them were just to practice, and then I started selling them, and I realized that I was doing no service to the world by making them to be sold because I wanted everyone to have access to my work. And so I made them all free, and I've put them in a library. The password, it is on thetaspring.com. The password is thetaspringguest. It is case sensitive, but in there you will find a weight loss program, smoking program, anxiety relief program, sleep program, success at work, procrastination, positive thinking, healing energy, stop feeling guilty. I think there's even one in there for breast enhancement because you can move. Crazy enough, I was doing research and I was like, might as well try it. You can move blood flow through the body, which helps with headaches too. If you move energy to the hands, you can move the heat to your hands, which can move the blood away from the head also. And then, hypnosis has been used in a lot of really amazing practices. In fact, it's becoming more prevalent in the medical community too, where you can use it for pain management. I personally don't work with that, but there are people who are allergic to anesthesia and they can put them into that, remember, deep hypnotic state I was talking about, the theta state. There's actually an even deeper state from that, but you can really disconnect from the body and you can do surgery without anesthesia. That point, I personally would be too nervous to do that, but it is real. I've seen it. I've even seen with my clients testing them, if you put them into a really deep state, you can pinch the back of their arms and they will feel nothing. And they're like, nope, and they'll bruise. So it's pretty wild, the power of the mind and the body all. And, it's a great practice if you are sick, to take away stress, quicker healing times, less perceived pain, and stuff like that too. And David Ellman was one of the pioneers in the medical community working with doctors on that. Yeah, so again, let me send this to everybody, the password, and Blake. I just sent that to Blake by accident. Sorry, Blake. And tomorrow, I don't know if you guys are all around, but I am giving another talk on energy levels, meaning what happens to you when you go into a stress state and how do you manage your stress states by this simple, really cool tool. So that's tomorrow, I think at 4 o'clock also. And it will be recorded if you want to check that out also. But if there are no more questions, then thank you guys. Blake, yes, you guys can absolutely email me. I'm going to put my email in here. I typed that right. I did. It's ajanelli@thetaspring.com. It's on my website. There's a contact me on the website too. I do get them and I try to get back to people in as little as like 24 hours. So thank you guys. I appreciate you. I hope you all are staying safe and well, and enjoy. Have a good night.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.